Hey, what's up? This one is just me today. I'm talking as prompted by my wonderful partner, Bethany, to talk about my testimony, essentially. And not essentially, it just is. It's my testimony for how kind of I got started in all of this that you're seeing. Like, this is a product of mine and Beth's walk in faith. And we kind of started our journeys at similar times, but independently, before we knew each other. And so this is my testimony of how it all came about for me because I was in a really bad spot. And, just to kind of maybe cut a long story short. So if there's maybe people out here who are like, I don't know if I want to listen to this whole thing, I'm not ready for this yet. I'll just tell you what happened. But basically, Jesus spoke to me in my ear. So I never really got the opportunity to decide whether I believed in something or not. It was like he's real, which means God's real, which means I need to really focus on this and let everything else in my life kind of die for now, whilst I navigate what this means for me and my life. So that's kind of what happened in the short term. Is that Jesus spoke to me. He woke me up one night and he whispered. I say he whispered. He did not whisper. It's just that no one else heard him because that's kind of how this works. Yeah, he said very loudly in my ear, enough to wake me up. Yeah, he said the words, "I am the shepherd." And I didn't know what that meant at the time. It's like, how did I know it was Jesus then? It's like, well, it was a very dark, it was very dark, it was a very low, masculine voice that was just kind of like full of love. And I had a visual at the same time as well, like his voice woke me up, and like obviously I was awake in bed, and I could still see in a completely different, almost like realm that wasn't this one, this physical one. And I could see this tunnel of light, and there was just a man in it, and he was kind of dancing. If I'm being honest, like he was dancing. He was joyful. It was a joyful man, but the voice that this man had was masculine. It was love. It was rooted in something that I knew had a lot of depth to it. And it was just as if someone was speaking to like my soul versus me. He addressed me in a way that no one else has ever addressed it. Like this, it was an undeniable event that happened in my life where I was like, okay, I need to go and like Google what this means because at the time I wasn't reading the Bible. So I am the shepherd was like what? And so I Googled it, and it was a verse, I think from maybe Matthew, I might be wrong, but saying, I'm the shepherd and I know my sheep. And it was a parable where Jesus was basically talking about his, knowing his followers and knowing who these people are, even if they don't know themselves through whatever's happened in their life, which we'll kind of get into. But yeah, that's kind of how it started for me. And pretty much after that point, so many things just started happening in my life that I couldn't explain to anyone. Um, and I'm excited to kind of share those things for you because there were physiological things that happened, there were psychological things that happened, there were, gosh, you name it. Like my life kind of like blew up, and it's just really important to know, or not to know. It's important for me to share this because if there's just one person that was in a similar position to the position that I was in, and they can find some kind of, I don't know, security and safety knowing that there's something else, then job done, right? And through this walk that I've now been on for the last kind of 4 or 5 years, I'm now at a point where I understand that I kind of owe Jesus my life. I owe God my life. It's not about me anymore. It's about doing whatever His will is, and fulfilling that. And so part of this is doing what feels really uncomfortable, which is to share my testimony. Because so far since we've started doing this, and speaking more and more about our pasts and our lives and things like that, it's been upsetting a lot of my closer inner circle, and yet really helping a lot of people on the outer circle, people who I don't know, are saying, gosh, I'm so thankful that you said this resonated so much with me. So that's kind of why we're doing this, is even though it's uncomfortable for us, we're seeing the fruit of it. We know it's helping other people out there, and so that's the reason why we're going to continue to do this. So sorry in a circle, but if you're uncomfortable now, you're going to be uncomfortable for the foreseeable. And so, yeah, the intention isn't to hurt people in the process. It's to help the greater good and the macro. And so, yeah, if I can deliver that a little bit more with maybe some love and compassion, then I'll absolutely try to do so. But I'm also me, and that means I have my own faults. And part of that fault is that I lack a little bit of empathy sometimes. So on with the testimony. So I want to talk to you a little bit first about like where I was at in my life, which was I was deeply rooted in an identity that is so far away from me now. But yeah, like I was a gym owner. CrossFit was my life. Helping people transform their health and fitness was the thing. I wanted to have a business. I wanted to be successful. And it was all rooted in a really good place. I wanted to be successful so that I could spend lots and lots of time with my future children. At the time, I didn't have kids, but I was like, I wanted to prepare myself for having kids. So I wanted time freedom and financial freedom in order to be able to provide a really good childhood because I didn't have the best childhood. And I think that's something that's really common with people who walk with God and walk with Jesus. Trauma is quite a big thing in people who are called. And from what I know now, it's kind of everything's made so much more sense now, but it's taken a lot of years for it to really start making sense. And that's another symptom or attribute of a journey with God is that, if you're in a point of your life where just things aren't making sense and you think there's no way out of it, there's a great song in Frozen 2. I have kids now, so we watch things like Frozen 2, and Olaf sings this great song about how everything will make sense when he's older. And that is so true if you are walking with God or maybe about to be. If things in your life seem really dark or seem like they don't make sense and there's no way out, likelihood is that you're probably called to do something really cool. You got lots of things to look forward to. But yeah, I was kind of in over my head. I started my business when I was 21. I did not know the first thing about running a brick and mortar space, unforeseen costs and stress and all these things kind of started adding up. So by the time I was kind of like 26, 27, I was just really kind of coming to the end of my tether with trying to operate a business. And when you're running a gym, community is a big thing, and trying to keep a hold of kind of people basically, it creates lots of politics, lots of drama. If the culture is very gossipy, things like that, then it can really ruin a business as well. So I had a lot of lessons through the business anyway, in regards to people. But the thing that I'd never really taken into account is that I was operating from a place where I had basically just stuffed all my trauma down into a box. And I was hoping that like that was enough. I was hoping that, it wasn't going to affect me in any way, shape, or form. But in reality, my subconscious beliefs and all the trauma that I'd kind of stored was actually running the show, which was why everything was so dysfunctional, I would say. Not even just in my business, but the relationships I'd chosen. And again, I'm not discrediting anyone here. I'm not trying to attack people. I'm trying to say, hey, actually, it was me. I was the problem, right? Like I hadn't faced any of the traumas of my childhood, and because of that, I was choosing everything that felt safe and comfortable versus the things that were going to enable me to actually grow and get to the places I wanted to get to. So I was my own worst enemy in a lot of ways, and in the process, I probably also hurt a lot of people through that process. And it got me to a point where I was just in the back of my house in the garden one day, and I was just like on my knees, and yeah, I started reaching out. I was just like, hey, God, if you're real, if you're there, give me a break. I deserve a break. And that's when I unintentionally opened up Pandora's box of trauma. Was because when you're at a point where you're going, God, please, I need a break, you're also saying, oh, everything that happened in my childhood was real, and I'm willing to accept that and work through it in order for this reality to be shifted, my identity to be shifted, so that I can become who I want to be and who I think I know I am to be, but without all the pretending. And so that's what it did. It forced me to really go back through my childhood and start really kind of unpacking that. And thankfully, with the Holy Spirit, I was able to do a lot of that, and it's taken a long time. And you'll understand why. I'll briefly talk about my trauma, but it doesn't really do me any good in talking about it because it kind of gives power to the story and gives power to things that we don't want to give power to anymore. But I think it's important to just share some context so that, again, if there's anyone who's suffered through maybe similar things and you don't know if there's a way out, a way to heal, there absolutely is. And so I want to share that. But yeah, I lost my dad when I was 4, and I had a troubled childhood then from that point on. and at least that's how my brain kind of compartmentalized everything. My dad died when I was 4. The next kind of big event that happened in my life was we moved into quite an abusive household. My mum experienced a lot of abuse in this household. My sister and I were kind of in a room together pretty much all the time, scared and fearful. Some of our family, one of my family members had given us a key. We were only 6 or 7. They'd actually given us a key and said, hey, if and when you're ready, just come over. We'll take you in. Which I wanted to do. I wanted to go because we were in a really bad space, and we just couldn't. My sister didn't want to leave at the time. I was like just desperate to get out, so I literally got onto our driveway in the middle of the night in my boxers. She was at the door, and I was like, "Come on, we got to go." And she was like, "No, I can't leave, Mum." So we stayed. Anyway, my mum left that relationship briefly. And this was like a physically abusive relationship that I think she suffered through. We had similar experiences as well with this one individual, and so we lived in a very fearful household for a while. I don't know how long. Um, and anyway, we moved out. We moved into some of our other family members' place, and we moved around theirs quite a few times. So we lived with like my granddad. We lived with my auntie. We lived with my grandma, and we just kind of circled around them for a while. It always just felt like we were on the move. And then we moved back in, I think, to this guy's house, and they tried it again, and it was exactly the same, obviously. But a lot of traumas kind of happened in that period of my life. And then when we finally kind of got out of that, we got into our own house. Um, Things kind of were just as bad. My mum kind of always took on the personality traits of the men that she had been with. And so some of those things followed us into the next house. And so I still found there were abusive behaviors going on in the next house. And then there was another man who had emotional abusive behaviors. We moved 2 hours south to a place called Worcester, away from all of our family at a time where we probably needed to be around our family. And we suffered under his household. My sister and I were kind of just shoved in a room, and we were taken from our mum as well, so we weren't allowed to even see or speak to her for long periods of time. um and then and the cycle repeated and repeated and repeated. So every time that she broke up with somebody, we moved. I think I've been in like 15 different houses by the time I was about 15, maybe even earlier than that. And she just kept choosing abusive men. And so, as a small boy who lost his dad at 4, you just lose all sense of safety and confidence in men. You feel powerless, and there were also like lots of toxic behaviors going around with, between my mum and my sister and me. So like there was I had no safety. I had no way of just kind of like expressing any of the hurt that was really going on. So I just stayed silent for a very, very long time. And it was also in a household where you couldn't express your emotions, right? Like I couldn't. There was no time for that. And abusive parents typically aren't going to be someone who's going to be like, "Hey, let's sit down and talk about this," right? So, yeah, I lived this very, in my eyes, just silent and compressed life. And for that reason, my mum always put me in Catholic schools, and so I had a big God wound as well, because I was like, well, I'm suffering every day. Every day. I was one of those kids that always wanted to stay at school. I was like, I never wanted to come home. I'd always be out. And which wasn't good either. I drank, and 100%, I hold my hands up. From 12, 13, I started drinking as many weekends as I could. I started smoking weed when I was very young as well. And I was just trying to find an out, of all the kind of pain that I had at home. And so, yeah, that was, I think, it's hard to even compartmentalize it. And this is why, is that I never really had a lot of I didn't have much memory about my childhood, really, for obvious reasons. There was a lot of abuse. There was a lot of loud seasons. There was violence. There was a lot of lack of safety, knowing what's going to happen next, and things like that. And when you've got that level of unsafety at home, it's very difficult to even just, you're in survival. You're thrust into just a state of survival, and you have to therefore become whoever you need to be to go under the radar at home. And that's the thing that I can now see in hindsight, is something I did in order to survive. But there comes a point in your life where that has to stop. And so that's kind of where the walk with God really started. And anyway, the behaviors that I'd obviously been susceptible to as a child then continued into my early adulthood. So when I was 19, I didn't really know how to set boundaries. I got kicked out. My mum was like, "We're moving to France. You can either come with us or you can go and do your own thing." And I was like 18 at the time. She told me that. I was really deciding what I wanted to do. I didn't really want to go to university, but I also didn't want to go and get a full-time job doing something I wasn't enjoying. So I was still in this kind of like, well, I'm trying to figure out what I've got to do, but now that kind of that safety again, that platform of safety had just been removed, and it was like, I'm not going to go and settle in the south of France. Like, what am I going to do there? So I was like, right, well, I'll move out then. So wasn't kicked out, but also wasn't like, I was kind of also given an ultimatum basically. So I'm going to say I was kicked out, and so I did that, and I started life with no money. I had no savings. I had no help financially from my parents or anything like that. Um, and so I had that lack of safety again going into adolescence, and that that paired with I hadn't learned all the normal things that I think maybe a lot of kids maybe learn, or at least kids with good parents learn, how to set boundaries, how to have confidence, how to make friends and do all the right things. Like, we've moved around so much that like I really struggled to just like make friends and be an authentic version of myself. And what eventually happened was, when I was 19, one of my paying clients, um, kind of, and this is the thing. So now, having hindsight, basically I was raped when I was 19, but at the time it didn't feel like that. It didn't seem like that was the thing. And although I felt powerless and I couldn't say no, at the time it was it was a muddy, very gray area to navigate. But basically what I'd say is, I had a client and they paid me to work with me. I was a PT at the time, and they paid for 5 sessions, but they only paid for like three or two or three out of the five. And I was desperate for money, so I was like, well, I need the money. And basically, we went out for one night with like the gym, and this person ended up. I left early because I was like, I could see that one of my clients was basically kind of trying it on with me, and I was like, I want to keep this kind of professional because I need the money for rent, and there's a massive age gap. This person was, I think, maybe in their 30s. I was 18, 19. So there was a big age gap between us. And I was just like, yeah, I need to leave. So I left. I went home. And either I was followed or someone else at the gym gave them my address. But they turned up on my door and basically said, are you going to let me in? And so I was just in my own house at this point where I was like, I can't say no. Like, I didn't have the power or the confidence to say no. Like, I was a kid, and I'd, been walked on all over for a long period of my life as a child. And so I was still operating from that place. And I didn't think I was going to cry. And, I didn't say anything. And so it carried on, and I just like fell out of my body for the night. And that was it. Like, I just got massively taken advantage of because I didn't know how to say no. Lord, give me the words, man. Give me the... So I guess this is therapy. I guess this is what this is. This episode is therapy now. So yeah, like that happened, and I didn't tell anyone. And obviously at the gym the next day, I was kind of celebrated. It was, good job, Mike, and yeah, getting it in, and the typical toxic masculine nature that you'd expect in a gym environment. And I was just like, I was stuck then because this person then had expectations of what continue, what had to happen and continue, and I didn't know how to say no. So we just carried on for like quite a while, like 6, 7 months. Um, so yeah, that this has got a good end, I promise. This story has a very good end. And anyway, so I started. This was here's what's really great. I'm going to talk about the same this person, right? And this is the thing. Now with hindsight, like I totally forgive this person, totally forgive them because they're also just a person doing a thing. Now I want to tell you something. Actually, this is one of the reasons why this never really came up for me until after the fact. I actually went on a kids CrossFit course on how to teach kids CrossFit. Part of the safeguarding, I used to love teaching kids. So I used to work at David Lloyd. I used to teach kids sports, and so all the holiday camps and the sports camps. And I used to love it. Kids are so fun. And obviously with that you do a lot of safeguarding, which is so ironic because the amount of abuse that I was susceptible to as a kid, and then I found myself like essentially teaching kids and trying to maybe like protect kids in lots of ways. um, it's quite ironic that you almost spin it to kind of turn something bad into something good, I guess. But I went on this CrossFit kids course, and they talk about the teens, like the teenagers in CrossFit, and there was a part of this course of talking about safeguarding, and the guy running it was incredible, really really great guy, and he talked about a situation. He said, "Hey guys, I just want to give you a situation," and in this situation, he said, there was a girl, 19, and obviously in the States, 21 is you're an adult. So anything, younger than that, you're still a kid. Whereas in the UK, 18, you're an adult, and which is ridiculous because you're not. Now that I know a lot of these things, but he gave the scenario where there was a 30-year-old man in the gym, and he would maybe put his wall ball next to the 19-year-old, and they would work out together. And then it was, I'll put your barbell away for you. And then it would be, a few weeks later, hey, do you want to, talk after class? And then it would be what, and you can kind of see where this is going, right? Is that like there's a bit of predatorial attack going on, and it was at that moment when he was explaining that story that like if you put a teenager in an adult class a little bit too soon, you're opening them up to these types of potential encounters, especially in gyms. Because again, people are wearing maybe minimal clothes, especially in CrossFit. People are wearing minimal clothes, and maybe there's no one's going to be walking around with their age on them. And that was kind of the moment where I was like, oh my gosh, like if I just flipped that, that was me. That's what happened in like that situation for me. And so those things really started to kind of like play on me a little bit, and it kind of inspired me a little bit. I was a really hard worker, and so I wanted to kind of go and do a lot, and so I pursued a job abroad, really to kind of escape a lot of stuff as well. Like I was trying to escape toxic relationships with my family, I was trying to escape the work environment that I was in, and I had like zero money. I was working at hour by hour, so I just when you're trading time for money. And this is why I'm so grateful for going through what I've been through, because like I've learned so many lessons, and trading time for money is one of them. You know, it doesn't keep you in a place of safety. It keeps you in a place of fight or flight all the time because you're just chasing money and you're saying yes to work that you might not actually be aligned to. So anyway, I started pursuing a job abroad, and thankfully, I got one. I got a year break in Kuwait where all my bills were paid for. I didn't have to pay for rent. I didn't have to pay for any bills whatsoever. I just was given a tax-free salary, and they flew me out, and I had a really really great year. And within that year, I got an opportunity to open a gym, but it required me to move back to the exact same place that I just tried to leave, and I was so desperate for safety and comfort and wanting my life to finally get better that I was like, well, I might not get this opportunity again, so I'll say yes, and so I did. But in that process, I'd also chosen a relationship that was also very safe as well. And this is the thing with trauma. When you come from trauma, your body only wants two things. It wants safety and comfort. That is it. And so you inevitably you don't know you're doing it, but you're choosing it. So what looks like a really great relationship or opportunity is really just it's not the truth. What's happening is your body is painting a picture about what this thing could be. So the relationship could save me because it could be safe. Business could offer comfort if it's successful. And so with no skills, I jumped into all of these things. And obviously jumped right into the deep end, like, and then you back into trauma cycles all over again. You're thinking, gosh, when am I going to get a break? The first 2 years of the business were really hard. It was that typical making ends meet. I hadn't learned yet how to not trade time for money, and so I was taking the same dysfunctional patterns I had as a teenager, and even though I was really great at my work, I was still operating from those dysfunctional patterns, and so the business side was really, really challenging. And so for the first 2 or 3 years, we struggled. And then COVID hit, and the relationship that I was in just was kind of going south because we were very codependent for obvious reasons. You attract in what you are. So if you're coming from trauma, you're going to attract in someone else who's maybe coming from some traumas as well. And so we had a very codependent relationship. And I'm zoomed out of this, right? I'm not condemning anyone else. I'm not pointing blame here or anything like that. And I'm not shifting anyone else under the bus. I'm just saying what it is. Because we deserve truth now. Like, you can't sit in your emotions forever, as you've just seen or heard. And this was kind of the start of that. So I'll cut a long story short, but the business was really, we were struggling for a long time. COVID hit, and I finally took on business mentorship. And that thing was like the first lift. It felt like the first lift in my life. And we started turning the business around. Everything was going well. The community was growing. We were profitable. And like, I'd employed like 6 full-time members of staff. And it was like ace. Great. The relationship that I was in still hadn't improved. That was still on its knees. But at least the business was kind of doing better. So I had a bit of breathing space. But that breathing space was exactly the breathing space that my mind and body needed to start processing a lot of the traumas that had happened. And so, whilst I found relief from the ridiculous amount of stress that the business had put me under, my brain started kind of like almost like malfunctioning. It was almost like, or malfunctioning. It was almost like, I'll give you an example. One night I was just sitting eating dinner and I just blacked out. And I was all of a sudden 7 years old. I was sitting in a table in our first abusive household. And there was, I don't know if it was like my sister or this guy's kid getting smacked. And I was just there. Like, I, and I can't explain it to you. It's like my brain just went, oh, you're seven. And this is where you are. And everything else that was in my life just fell away in that couple of seconds moment. And when I came back, my partner at the time was looking at me terrified. I was gripping a plate in front of me as hard as I could, and I didn't know where I'd been. I was terrified, and obviously that kind of puts fear in their brain as well, of like, well, hang on a minute, this guy's unstable. And at that point, I was like, I need to fix this. Like, something's really wrong. And I started to kind of maybe link things up. It was like, you know what? I've had quite a lot of in my early adolescence. I've had quite a lot of like pivotal moments that weren't very good, right? Maybe even caused some more trauma. And it was like, well, that's a link. There's a correlation there between my childhood and now my adolescence, right? The same patterns and things are coming back with a bit of a vengeance, despite me trying to just outwork them, outtrain them, outdo everything. I was pursuing success rather than dealing with my trauma. And so, yeah, my brain was like, nope, I can't do that. And so I went kind of down the new age spirituality route a little bit. I was still kind of angry and mad at God at this point. Not intentionally, like, it wasn't like it was on my brain every day, but I think growing up in a Catholic school, you're just kind of like, yeah, like, I used to take the mick out of it. I used to kind of take the mick out of people that were doing the things I'm doing now, which is ironic. And great, full circle moment, 100%. But like, yeah, where were we? We I got into the new age bit a little bit. So I started reading, people like Joe Dispenza about maybe some traumas and how to kind of think your reality into a bit, think your way into a better reality, and that you're kind of the master of your own universe. And obviously, all these things really stuck out to me because of my history, right? It was like, yeah, why? Of course, I would want like reality control because so far my life feels like it's been completely out of control, despite what it was looking like from the outside. From the outside, it looked like I had everything that you could ever want. It looked like I had my own business, a really great family set up, a good relationship. I had dogs. I had a house to live in. Like I was comfortable, right? I got the thing that I was looking for. I got comfort and I got some kind of safety, but I wasn't happy. And and I know that's where a lot of people are. A lot of people are comfortable and safe, and then going, "Oh, why don't I feel better yet?" And it's because you haven't. It's because you've like our bodies are designed to seek those two things, and so if you've then come from trauma, it's like that's like the only goal that your brain has. It just wants you to feel safe and comfortable, and that's doesn't not necessarily consistent with like having living a joyful life. Living a joyful life now really feels like having a little bit of both, having a bit of sorrow, having a bit of despair, and then also having happiness, joy, excitement, all the good things. Like having balance of both things is actually what a really good life's about. And so yeah, that's kind of where the new age kind of stuff started coming in, was that it allowed me to maybe choose how I was feeling as opposed to kind of being led by my feelings. And that's where I really started to kind of think, well, you know what, maybe it's time to kind of go back and start really thinking about my dad a little bit. And I'd had this idea that, well, maybe if my dad had been around, then everything wouldn't, all the other things wouldn't have happened in my life, which is easy to think when you don't, you haven't lived that reality. And so I had to kind of go start working through the traumas that had happened in succession, basically. And yeah, like it got to a point where I started to really grieve my dad for the first time. I don't really think I'd grieved for my dad maybe since I was like a kid. And it's different when you're doing it with an adult lens on life. And so that's kind of where my traumas, I first started kind of really digging into my trauma, was like, the new age kind of spirituality really put this idea that you can't live the life you want because you're living off subconscious beliefs and programming, which are shaped in your childhood by the events of your childhood. So it was kind of like, okay, so if I finally face those things, then I'll get the life I want. And that's kind of what really kicked off the season. And at that moment, I had this really great colleague. He's not a colleague necessarily, but I worked with him for a little bit. His name's Boris. He lives in Australia. Metcon Creative. If you're in the gym space and you're needing a branding expert, go and give him a shout. He's ace. But he sent me this book, and it was called How to Pray for Normal People. And this was about the time I just started kind of, New Age is very close to God. They're not God, and it's not quite the same thing. But it was definitely a path. It was definitely an easy way to hear about God before walking with God. So I'm quite grateful that it exists in its way that it does. But like, thankfully, I never really got stuck into the new age stuff because I always knew, like, I always had this feeling. I always knew that there was something more to the experience I'd had in life so far. It was easy for me to put it down, but it was a great way for me to grieve my dad, because the new age stuff is really great for like lots of life after death kind of podcasts, and you can listen to people's NDE experiences and things like that. And a lot of the NDE experiences, and that's what I did. To kind of grieve my dad, I needed to kind of almost know that he was still somewhere. And when you listen to like NDE experiences, this is a near death experiencer. They all kind of had the same story, that and a lot of them met Jesus, a lot of them met God, and some people even kind of went to hell briefly for a second before they were then saved by Jesus. And it was like, wow, you all have the same story, and a lot of them had in common that they weren't faith led before their near death experience, but they were after. And so when you listen, I started listening to that a lot. And it really helped. Like, it helped me kind of grieve my dad and find a little bit of meaning to that part of my life where it's like, okay, yeah, I lived my entire life without kind of a safe masculine presence within it. But like, okay, I'm probably going to see him again, maybe at some point. That'll be great. So yeah, that then I got this book from Boris, and the second chapter was like, you need to express your anger to God before you can kind of get that next step, like work with him or partner with him, or have him kind of do things in your life. And so that's what I did. Like, I took an afternoon and I got really angry at God for everything that had happened in my life up to that point, all the business stress. Like, one of the biggest things that had happened in my business that really pushed me to the point of like, I'm just not going to do this again, was we'd had maybe like in CrossFit gyms, there's quite a common theme of like mass exoduses where either a coach or a client will basically go, I can do this better. And they go down the road, open up a gym, and they operate in exactly the same way you were operating because they just don't know any better. Like, and like I started there as well. Hold my hands up. I started there. I was like, I can do this better. I'll open same thing, same setup, same prices, or a little bit more expensive, and you think you know what you're doing, you don't. And eventually, like I said, we turned our gym into something that was really, really great. We were transforming people's health rather than giving people CrossFit. And that's what the CrossFit community didn't like. They didn't like that, I was more focused on giving people deep health workouts rather than high intensity workouts, because it kind of conflicts with the methodology, even though it doesn't. That's a podcast for a different day. But yeah, we'd had like I think we'd had like one or two mass exoduses in the business, and then we had kind of one final one where I was like, I'm just done. Like, this is going to keep happening, and this is probably my problem. Um, and so I really got pushed on all fronts. My relationship was dead. Wasn't happy there. I couldn't make the progress I wanted to make in the business. I didn't really have a way out. I felt trapped again. And this was where I was like, I really need like some kind of powerful saving hand. And so I took this book and I just got angry at God. One day I just started going absolutely mad, being like, if it wasn't enough to kind of take my dad, if it wasn't enough to put me in an abusive household for years consecutively throughout, I think from 7 all the way till I was 8, until I moved out, I was just in these abusive households. Um, and then like I got so mad. I got so mad, and I was just like, if you exist, I was like, you're a prick. Like, you're this, you're that. And I took a whole afternoon off to do that, and it was great. Like, I cried, I like expressed a lot that was obviously kind of in me, and it was great. But that's kind of when everything started to change. Like, I don't know if it was that night or maybe a few nights after, but I used to really like stargazing, and I was just met one night by what I now know to be the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit literally visited me in my back garden. It was this light, and it was like not high enough for it to be like a plane or a satellite or anything like that, but not low enough where it could be like a drone. And this thing just went, and it was like in and out of existence within a matter of seconds, like not even probably a second. And I was like, oh, I'm tired. What? That's weird. What's that? That was really strange. And I had this like almost like internal dialogue of, maybe it was intuition, right? At the time, it just felt like it was my voice. And it was like, hey, maybe you should look again. And it said it like that. It said it so like, hey, why don't you look again? Like, so quiet and so smooth, which I now know to be the Holy Spirit's voice. And anyway, I turned back and it was there again in exactly the same fashion, exactly the same place. And this light came to visit me pretty much every night I was out there for a while, until I went, okay, you kind of got my attention. And at that point, this is when things really started to change, and my life got really crazy. And you might be thinking, wow, this guy is mad. And like, that's fine. I'm absolutely fine with you thinking I'm mad. Because there's so much fruit that has come from this walk that I've been on, that I don't need people to believe this. This is just my testimony. And like, anyway, I'm just going to crack on. Yeah, I like, this is when I started getting woken up in the nighttime, where the first thing that happened was, um yeah, like Jesus just spoke to me. Like, that was the next thing. Jesus just spoke to me, and he said, I'm the shepherd. I know my sheep. And I didn't know what that meant. I went and Googled it. It was Bible. It was Bible reference. I was like, okay, Jesus said that in the Bible, so that was Jesus. And it sounded like him, and he knew who I was. He knew me. Like the way he spoke to me, it was like he knew me. And he's saying it as well. He's like, "Hey, I'm the shepherd, and I know my sheep." So like, it was just like, "Oh gosh, like what? Like you know me?" And it was just like, and here's the thing: what I know now is that like, if you've got a God wound in you that you don't know about, that will be blocking you. So if you're like, if you're one of these people that's kind of like, well, if God's real, why does he let all these things happen? It's like, well, that points to your God wound. That's your wound that you have that is blocking you from experiencing the answer to that question, because that question is answered all the time by God. And it's a really simple answer, but no one else can tell you it. He has to tell you it. But if you're blocking it, then you're not going to get there. And so that kind of triggered a lot of things in me. I started to kind of dive deep. I like to know things, so I started to dive really deep on spirituality, Christianity, Catholicism, you know, every religion. I started just looking at every religion then. But the one thing that just kept on coming back all the time was Jesus. Like it didn't matter which religion I went to, he was there. And so it was just kind of like, okay, I'll do that. And I found a lot of um I guess kind of like material on meditation. I found over and over and over again, especially in like kind of the Catholic world and the Christian world, meditate, and that's kind of where you'll find God. And so I started meditating, and funnily enough, like all these experiences just kept on happening, and they got more potent, and I started to heal more things and see more things and remember more things. And I had so many experiences in meditation. Like the first kind of, I really struggled with meditation when I first started. I had to use a lot of like tools and aids. So I would listen to music sometimes. I would have guided meditations on, but eventually I got to a point where I could meditate silently. And that's where a lot of the profound experiences happened. I had conversations with Jesus. I had conversations with my old self and my dad. And I got to kind of see things from even God's perspective sometimes about healing and about all my life's journey. And like he knew all the suffering I've been in. He started to show me moments within my suffering where he had placed himself so that he could be with me whilst I was suffering, which is wild, by the way. That's such a wild thing. So one of the ways I was really depressed at one point in my life where I had a box room in one of these houses where it was the width of a single bed. It was the length of a sorry, it was the width of a single bed. I had a chest of drawers in there, and I had a TV on top of the chest of drawers, and that's all I could get in this room because it was tiny. The wallpaper was black. I wasn't allowed to change it. I had black curtains. It was the most depressing room I've ever lived in my life. And I used to put this concert on every night because it would make me feel like I was somewhere else, on the TV. And there was this song that used to play in this concert. I think it was like a Kill Switch Engage concert. And I didn't know at the time, but they were like a Christian Catholic band, or they had like ties to being a Christian band. And one of the lyrics was like breathe me in. Where I was at in my journey was I was really learning to meditate and use the power of the breath to kind of change your physiological response to life, basically. Get into these deeper, more restful states so that you can meditate. And God was like, see, and he was like, I was preparing you for this. He's like, this is where I was. I was with you in that suffering then. I was planting these messages in these songs and all the things you were consuming so that when the time came, you would know that I was here. And like, he just showed me how much like he had fathered me when I had no father. Like he showed me where he was in all those really tough moments. But that and all that stuff was shown to me through meditation. So like if you're not doing that now, you want to get onto that. Meditation was life changing for me. And so I kept that practice up, and I still do now. Like it's one of the things that I do with God. I try and do it every day. I have kids now. It's very challenging to get that sorted, but for the most part, if my partner Beth can give me half an hour in a day, that's kind of where it goes to. It doesn't, excuse me, it doesn't go to exercising at the moment and things that are going to be good for my body. It goes for things that are going to be good for my life and the lives of those around me, which is meditation. It really calms and helps you really ground and get clear on what needs to actually happen in your day for everyone else to have a really, really successful day and a good day. So yeah, like I started doing that, and this was when my life started kind of blowing up. I sold the gym. I decided to sell, and I went and got a job pretty much the next day with the business mentorship company that I had been a client of for a while, which was really great because like I had a lot of people at the time slandering me, being like, "You're a poor business owner," or this. That. I was like, "I'm not. You just don't like what I'm doing," and it was really nice for me to kind of get hired by the very company that had I'd been a client of for so long because they saw all the good that I was doing and all that I was trying to do, and so that was really great. So I worked with them. My relationship blew up. I left that, and I was just God basically, and this was all led by God. Like he literally told me, he was like, "You're gonna sell your gym," and I was like, "What?" Like it just got into a really good spot as well. And he was like, "You're gonna sell it." I was like, "Right, great, okay." I trust you. I will sell it. So I did. And then he was like, "You're gonna move," and I was like, "Okay, where?" And he was like, "Don't worry about that." But he did. He just moved me and moved me and moved me, and I eventually moved home, and I started a healing journey. That was ultimately what Jesus was doing in my life, was he was starting the journey of healing, and that's what led me back to my hometown, where I moved in with family members and continued my journey there, and that was exactly the same as expected. Um, you know, just because you're healing, not a lot of other people want to heal, and so there was, what do I say? There was dismay there and more issues. Um, but God just kept doing it. He just kept moving me forwards. He would prepare me for the next season. I got a new job. He told me I wouldn't be in that for long. That came true. I got a new apartment. He told me I wouldn't be there for long. That came true. And I was so thankful. Like he basically pointed me towards Beth. Again, unbeknownst to me at the time. I was so at the point where I met Beth, I was so like wanting to be by myself and just kind of have a relationship with God, that I didn't want a relationship at all. And she just kept showing up. I did some acupuncture with Beth to kind of help heal some emotional trauma that was kind of stored in the body, and just process all of that sort of stuff physiologically. And then we just kind of got talking, and we found that we had like so much in common. And then, even though I hadn't told her anything about my walk with God yet at that point, she just asked me one day, and that had been like a theme. Once I'd started walking with God and Jesus and stuff, like I would meet people and they'll be like, "Hey, could you give me some advice about God?" And I'd be like, "What? Like, how do you know that I'm even?" And they'll be like, "Don't know. You had like this. I just felt like I should ask." And so I started pointing people to God a lot more because I'd had all these like profound experiences, obviously. And so I started finding that, like God would just put people in front of me and he'd be like, "Well, you need to talk to these people. This person needs something from you that you have." I'm like, "Okay." And I thought Beth was just another one of those people, who. And so anyway, we started like walking every night together, me, her, and Theo, because she had a little one, and who I get to be father of now, which is just ace. He's taught me so much about life. Oh, I love that child. Um, yeah, we just started walking together every night, pretty much. She would force me out on walks on the days where I'd be in it, like in the healing. She would force me out, and she was great, and she just kept me going. She was an absolute rock. Eventually, we just progressed. We just went from friends talking to, do you want to go out on a date? And should we go, we just did all the normal stuff, right? And then she was like, "Yeah, I'm kind of walking with God too. I've got my own story going on with God, and I'd like some advice because I can't really get to church, but I need to know how." And I was like, "Well, you don't need a church. Like, it's the last thing you need, actually." I didn't find God in a church. And I think that's kind of the big thing is most people with powerful testimonies don't find God in a church. They find God when they're on their knees in the depths of hell, suffering with no way out, and they don't know how to get out. And I don't know if that's where she was at. I think she kind of was. I was like, "Yeah, you just need to you got to try and find some silence in your life. And if you can find some silence in your life, that's where you'll find God. Like, he'll be in the place that's quietest. But if you can't get quiet, then you're not going to find him." So I kind of pointed her in the direction of meditation and doing all that sort of stuff. And yeah, she started having Her job would get, like, she would earn more money that month, or she would, some kind of need that she had would be met. And so now that we've been like walking that journey together, this is when our life really started to change. And what was really great about having a partner that was with God as well is that, like, the walk that you had up until that point was, it's kind of like, it's like he shakes you. It's like he shakes you of all the things that you don't need anymore, right? He heals you of all the stuff that you don't want to be, that you need to be healed from, that you don't want to face by yourself. He does all that with you. But then, when a union happens, which is what we have, that's when things will really change. Everything starts to speed up and everything becomes more important. And you have to then start taking your walk with faith very, very seriously. And so that's what we're doing. We're being very obedient to what God wants us to do right now. And so, yeah, like, I don't know. I feel like I've been talking for a while. I don't know how long I have been talking for, but that's kind of what happened to me. I want to just briefly circle back into some of the experiences that I had, because I had to navigate this awakening with God by myself whilst being in a household with someone else at the time who wasn't ready to walk with God, and that's challenging. I would have like, God would wake me up in the middle of the night, and he would teach me warfare prayer. And that might sound like ridiculous to some people, but like, this is what would happen. He would wake me up at like 2 o'clock in the morning, and this happened for weeks of it, and I could never understand what was going on. I couldn't talk to it about anyone because I thought everyone's gonna think I'm crazy. But he would wake me up and he would show me. I used to have these visions, and he showed me a homeless man once with, like, it was just raining, and this guy was really quite sad, and God was like, pray for him. And I was like, okay. So I prayed for him, and I didn't really know how to pray at the time, so it was probably quite a weak prayer. I was like, God, please protect the homeless man. You know what I mean? Like, really, really silly. But I'd pray for him, and then God would literally be like, okay, thank you, go back to sleep. Next night, he'd wake me up. He would show me children of poverty. He would show, and like, not in the thing, well, not what you're thinking about, not like those adverts that you see on TV with like African kids and kids of war and things like that. No. He would show me, like, parents who were maybe heroin addicts in the UK, and he would show me the children on the floor, hungry, wishing that their parents were awake to feed them. And I was like, fuck, you know what I mean? Like, he'd show me these visions, and he'd be like, pray for these kids. I was like, yeah, absolutely. I can absolutely see why these kids need prayer. So I'd pray for them, and then he'd be like, cool, thank you, go back to sleep. And I'll go back to sleep. And this happened weeks and weeks and weeks. And then finally, Jesus woke me up one night, and he was like, come and take a walk with me. And I was like, okay, what does that mean? And this is weird, because, like, when Jesus or God wakes you up, you don't really know if you're asleep or if you're awake, because you're awake, but then you're seeing other things. So even though you're like, oh, this is my bed and I'm in my bedroom, you're also somewhere else with him. It's so bizarre. And anyway, so one day he took me over a town. He took me over the city that I was in, and there was a beast lay over the city. That's all I can describe it as, just a beast. And I thought, how does that exist? Like I was like, that exists. Wow. Okay. Like, how? And if that exists and is over this city has no chance. Like, that was the initial thought in my head. And Jesus was like, pray in my name. I was like, what? And he was like, pray in my name. He's like, I want you to move that beast out of this town. And I was like, okay, what do I do? And he was just like, just tell it to move. And I was like, move. And he was like, and this beast just literally went, like, it just huffed at me. Like, absolutely not. Why would I? Get lost. He was like that. And Jesus repeated himself. He's like, now pray in my name. I was like, hey, move on in Jesus' name. This thing took a look, moved off straight away. That's all. Go back to sleep. These are the types of dreams and prayers These are the types of dreams and visions I was having with God. And I had to just wake up and just go to work. like a normal person. Like, oh yeah, morning everyone. How's your day? Get a good sleep last night? Like, I didn't, but I couldn't tell you why. And this is the type of shit that was happening. And and it was progressing. Like every dream that I had was more, I don't know, eye-opening, awakening. Yeah, eventually what it's designed to do is it's designed to kind of it's designed to wake you up into the reality that you actually live in. Like, it's depicted so many times in the Bible that like we don't live in a world of flesh and bones, right? And people don't understand that, but it's like what this is a projection. Like even New Age spirituality is really probably does this a lot better, and quantum physics does this a lot better as well. Like in quantum physics, they're finding now that this is a simulation, right? Like this is a projection, this is a creation that we are here to experience, which means that we're not this thing. So even science is kind of pointing us towards a creator now, which is great because it means that more and more people are probably going to find this experience, this godly experience. But anyway, kind of getting off track. What else happened? There were so many things that happened. It was just wild. I kept having experiences with Holy Spirit in the back garden. And I started praying more. I started asking for things, and these things would show up. So it was like, yep, God exists, and I'm with Him. And so that was my testimony up until really kind of meeting Beth and starting walking together. Now, since we've walked together, gosh, so many things have happened. This podcast has happened. Our lives have changed in so many ways. We're learning provision. We've been through a wilderness season with God. He's really he's shaken both of us so much that everything that wasn't serving us has died away, which leaves you with no other identity other than the one that you can have in Christ, and that's the best thing. This is probably where I want to maybe finish this testimony today, is that I suffered a lot. I had a lot of trauma, and that trauma was really driving a lot of my adult life. And since coming into union with Beth and covenant with God, that trauma has been completely transformed into something that doesn't really hold me back anymore. I'm not afraid to talk about it. I'm not afraid to keep it. It's not mine. It's not for me. It's actually to really help other people. And as long as we're not talking about it, that's probably where the problems kind of continue to persist. So if you haven't checked out our Deep Health series yet, go and check out our Deep Health series. We talk about everything from like relationships, physical health, emotional health. I have an extensive background in fitness and health coaching, but also in business coaching as well. And so what we're trying to do with this is link it all back to essentially, your output. What you see in your reality is actually just a projection of everything that's going on inside of you. So if you're not happy with your business, you're not happy with your relationship, you're not happy with your own health or your time that you even have to think, you can't steward your time very well, then that kind of health series is really kind of a starting ground for helping you really elevate that, because that's what we've been doing with our backgrounds. We've been able to, Beth's an amazing healer. She's absolutely fantastic when it comes to healing, and we're finding that that's probably one of the reasons why we've been brought together is together we have a lot to really offer people in terms of help and relief for whatever it is they're going through. But yeah, I guess I'll just finish with like, God is fantastic. He will change your life, and it won't always feel great. There's a lot of scripture in the Bible that talks about, division within households. That's kind of been the theme of our wilderness season is, now that we've come into our walk with God, it's upsetting lots of family members, lots of close family members who aren't ready yet to face their own. When you come into a union with Jesus, after a long period of getting your stuff together and becoming maybe more of who you're supposed to be, you end up becoming a bit of a mirror to other people, and that can be very uncomfortable for them. Fortunately or unfortunately for me, that's kind of who I've always been. I never had good relationships when I was a kid because I used to mirror a lot of the behaviors of the adults that I was around. So I used to kind of just, I was a truth teller. I'd tell the truth a lot. And for abusive people, that's not always a good thing. That's not what they want. So if you're going through a season, if you're in a hard place and you're like, I just need to breathe, I wish there was someone out there that could help me. Like there are so many people. My experiences, I'm in a really great place now. I have mentorship from faith-led entrepreneurs, and they've really helped me heal my brain and understand why my brain was looping I developed complex PTSD from my experiences as a child, and that's been the real battle for me, despite what my life looked like, was, every night on your bed when you're going to sleep and those thoughts are there, like that's where it was. My brain would just continually loop my childhood over and over and over again. All these just what I had placed as signal, my brain had placed as significant events. Um, it just created this loop, and I just couldn't get out of it. And no amount of therapy, no amount of um, exercise, no amount of alcohol. But I used to overconsume alcohol when I was between 12 and about probably 17. It got better when I started mixed martial arts because I became more disciplined. But yeah, I definitely, there's nothing that you're going to be able to do um, that's going to help you with that other than accept Jesus Christ into that. It's the only way you're going to heal your brain. And so yeah, like that's my testimony. Weird to kind of put this on a video and share it with everyone and be vulnerable like that, but I hope some of you, if it's just one person that will just find some value in that, then hey, you're not alone, and you can do it. You can do anything, and you're gonna become an even better person than the one that you are now. And yeah, alrighty, peace.